So, good afternoon. I'm Renate Ogilvie. I'm a Buddhist. Very often I'm the token Buddhist that the organizers bring out. I'm often given 12 minutes to explain karma, 15 minutes to go through the entire death process and rebirth. Today I've been given 20 minutes to talk about meditation. Some years ago, one of the neuroscientists, not an uncharming man, said to me, "Renate, you seem to be quite intelligent. What are you doing with this old-fashioned religion?" So you will forgive me if I will nonetheless say a few Buddhist words about meditation. First of all, I want to be a bit precise as a Buddhist. And that is to actually define the difference between brain and mind. It's been used rather, interchanging during the conference. The conference is actually and has been called the mind and its potential, not the brain and its potential. And actually, as Buddhists, we see a difference there, which is quite important. The brain being a material, an organ. The mind is, however, without any substance, any color. It is the repository of all our thoughts, all the non-material aspects of who we are. His Holiness the Dalai Lama was once talking to scientists who denied that there was a mind and that it was all brain. And he said, well, in that case, your wives, are you in love with their brains? So of course we're not. We're actually in love with the mind of a person. So we, as Buddhists, we distinguish between the two. Now, I'm absolutely delighted that about 95% of you are regular meditators. I think that's just terrific. So I think I will just speak very much for myself and the maybe 3 or 4 people who are not regular meditators. And I have to say that I find it quite hard to meditate regularly. The only thing that really gets me out of bed at 5:30 in the morning is the shame of not sitting on my cushion up in the gompa as a teacher in the center where I work. So that's often the case, that actually I have to force myself a bit. So for those of you, the very few who do not regularly meditate for half an hour, maybe 2 hours every morning, this is your speech. Because there is, I think, a bit of a dirty secret about meditation. Only for those 3 or 4, of course, myself. And I think that dirty secret is that we all know how good it is for us, and we have heard amazing results of regular meditation practice. But the truth is also that we live in extraordinarily busy times. We are, most of us, extremely time poor. We're under all sorts of pressure. We multitask. We have family we have to look after, or maybe we're just plain lazy. So to actually get us to sit and meditate is actually quite difficult. It's quite difficult. It's also not made easier by the fact that we do know how good it is for us, and yet we don't do it. And this is something that seems to be a paradox. A friend of mine went to her spiritual teacher and she said, "Rinpoche, I know what to do. I also know what not to do, but I always seem to be doing the opposite. Why is that?" And he looked straight at her and said, "It is because you're stupid." So if we accept those 3 or 4, of course not the 95% who are here, that this minority, that we're just plain stupid, lazy, and so on, but we also have to then acknowledge something, and that is our life is not conducive to meditation. Of course, it would benefit massively from meditation, as we've heard from all the speakers. You know, we've seen the graphs, we've heard from Rasmus about, how firms benefit and so on. So, of course, we know we would massively benefit also. But as we look at our daily experience, it is just too hard, or it seems to be. So I want to introduce the concept of non-meditation. I want to introduce the concept of no expectations, because that actually often turns out into a very, very real obstacle. We've heard that meditation, certainly from a Tibetan point of view, gom, as we've heard, actually simply means familiarizing ourselves with what goes on in our mind. It doesn't say anything about results. Of course, implicit is a massive result. We've been talking about potentials. Now, from a Buddhist point of view, there's a massive potential in every single sentient being, everyone here in this room and beyond. And that is the potential of being completely liberated, becoming Buddhas. So that is the big potential. All the little potentials are useful, but that is the big potential. And that is the prize. And that is not just for us to become Buddhas, but to actually work for others, liberating others, helping others. So that's a massive potential. But when it comes to working with the mind, and remember what we said, the mind is this insubstantial aspect of us, clear, knowing. It's like space, but space, in a sense, is like a corpse. What we have is the mind, which is space-like, but it has awareness, which is fantastic. If we use that awareness in non-meditation, we're actually doing something that is feasible. And that is, let me be practical, that we fall out of bed, as I do at 5:30. Of course, I have to go to formal meditation because quite often I also lead it, so it's better if I turn up. So we fall out of bed, and then I would suggest what we do is no more than 5 or 10 minutes, no more than that, of what I call joyful resting. Joyful resting is sitting and simply taking the mind, which has already gone wandering, back into the body, becoming aware of the body in the way that Timothea just described very beautifully, and that we've also heard in other contexts. Taking the mind back into the body. That's it. And just staying with whatever comes up in our mind without expectation, and especially without any judgment. Just seeing what comes up. And here the Buddha gives us really interesting insights. What comes up in our mind is not who we are. We are not the anger. We are not the jealousy. We are not the pettiness. These are things, these are thoughts and mind states that come up in our mind, and until we act out, until we get entangled, they are what we Buddhists call karma-free. We're not responsible for what comes up in our mind. And so we can joyfully rest and just think, wow, this is amazing. This is brutal. This is funny. This is embarrassing. And without any judgment, without any expectation, simply sit and accept what comes up in the mind. No more than 5 or 10 minutes, I forbid, no more. Because then you're getting into a different area. Because those moments of joyful resting you should do many times during the day. As many times as you can manage. Sometimes you can do it sitting in front of your computer and pretending, you're doing something. But your mind is actually not wandering. Your mind is just looking at what comes up in the mind. So taking the mind back into the body. In the West, we're very performance-orientated. We have expectations we want to achieve. This is actually an obstacle to meditation. Of course, there are results. We've seen it. But the mind is a funny thing. Let's just call the mind a thing. The mind will do the opposite of what we tell the mind. We go to a funeral, we think, oh, this is really sad. And then immediately we think something really stupid. Or I sit in His Holiness the Dalai Lama's teachings, very rare, very special, in the presence of what I believe a fully realized Buddha. And I think of something that I haven't thought about since I was about 3, namely changing my hairstyle. I've had this German helmet since I was about 3. So for me to waste my concentration during the teachings of a living Buddha considering a new hairstyle is ridiculous. So we tell the mind what to do, it will reliably do the opposite. So we need to engage in something which I call, and I thought I was very original, but apparently it's a book published with that title, mind whispering. That is not telling the mind what we want it to do. Simply allowing the mind, so tricking the mind into a sense of relaxation, but awareness. Because when I say joyful resting, there's part of us, let's just call it a sort of incredibly benign policeman. Attention, alertness, that takes us gently back to simply observing, no more. We can count our breath. Well, good luck. I mean, I don't make it beyond, say, 2 when I count. But that's fine, it's terrific. I'm not knocking it. Whatever happens, accept it joyfully. If you find you get distracted, don't beat yourself up. This is the noxious aspect of being Western, that we think we have to achieve. We think that we should meditate in order to gain something. That we should meditate in order to find out what goes on in our mind, without fear, without expectation, no fear, no hope. Simply, as Isherwood said in his novel, I'm a camera. Or you could see it like a TV set with the sound turned off. Stuff comes up, we look at stuff, and then if we don't cling to it, it will do what it naturally does, and that is simply go. Why? Because the teachings of the Buddha states that all mind states, all thoughts are impermanent, transient. Why is that? Because the teachings are that all phenomena are impermanent. But we don't allow them to be impermanent. That's the problem. Every morning we get up and we carefully, for example, water our little black hate garden. Of course we can't get rid of our anger. We go to anger management courses. Well, of course, if we have to actually make ourselves artificially angry, then, we will again experience some sort of anger. Whereas if we simply observe strong emotions, strong mind states, they will actually disappear. This is the secret. This is almost too simple to be true. And yet, if we simply observe without judgment, those mind states, those thoughts will become more and more transparent. And that is the mind whispering. This absence of judgment, this absence of running commentary. Oh my God, I'm not doing it right. Oh, now I'm doing it right. Yes, I'm close to it. That is actually not going in the right direction. So I want you to sit there in your pajamas in the morning for maybe 5 minutes, because mornings are very difficult, and do joyful resting. During the day, maybe even in the toilet if there's no other place, joyful resting, watching the mind. And then, without expectation, things will happen. But if you expect it, if you think, Renate talked about joyful resting because it'll make me this, that, and the other, the mind says, I'll show you about being relaxed, I'll be really tense. So mind whispering has to be a bit more sophisticated. And it has to basically, okay, I don't care what happens here. I just do what she suggests and see what happens. I sit here, I'm aware of my body now, thought of, and I sort of notice what goes on in my mind. It can't be all, can it? Actually, in a funny sort of way, it is. So if we can relax our Western minds at the same time as gently taking them back to observing what goes on in our mind without any expectation, we're doing okay. And it is feasible. Okay, 5 minutes then. 5 minutes, 5 times a day. And the mind, and this is where neuroscience, after all, has a point, the mind will work with the brain. The brain will, of course, develop those famous neural pathways. And we will actually find that this is a routine which will have results, but only if we don't expect them. So this is actually a contradiction. Now, I will just say one thing at the end, because it's going to start flashing red in a minute. One of the masters said, you Western students, you have magnificent houses. If you clean them up a bit, meaning the minds, if you clean them up a bit, you will live very, very comfortably. And I think using a modern image, the hardware of our brain, and in that sense also connected to it, the mind, is magnificent in the West, very, very clever, extremely clever. But the content, the software is so crap. It is like using one of those Cray computers and play Super Mario. It is like actually using a magnificent, magnificent aspect of who we are for completely trivial pursuits. Now, we need to start servicing the mind. It's very simple. It's like servicing the car. And we need to trick the mind into accepting that, so that we don't actually fall into that sort of trap again, where we tell the mind, okay, I am now a meditator. I'm going to be calm as Rasmus. I'm going to be charming as Timothea. I will have all the right graphs developing. No. The mind says, no, you'll be out of control. You'll be completely tense. I just will not allow it. So no expectations. Joyful resting. Thank you very much.